Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Hormonally Speaking. We've got some really interesting topics on tap for you today, including something that I personally love in terms of what I've experienced from a therapeutic standpoint, and that is somatic therapy. I think all forms of therapy are super valid, but in my personal experience, once I sort of got past the point of recognizing some things through talk therapy, I really needed to kind of go deeper. And we can talk about some of the whys of that today with our guest. And there's so many other good things that we're diving into. So I'm super excited to speak with Maria Victoria Albina, who is a master certified somatic life coach, UCSF trained family nurse practitioner, and breathwork meditation guide with a passion for helping humans socialize as women, realize that they are their own best healers by reconnecting with their bodies and minds so that they can break free from codependency, perfectionism, and people pleasing and reclaim their joy. She's the host of the Feminist Wellness Podcast, holds a master's degree in public health from Boston University School of Public Health, and a BA in Latin American Studies from Oberlin College. Victoria has been working in health and wellness for over 20 years and lives on occupied Muncie Lenape territory in New York's Hudson Valley. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Oh my goodness. I mean, that's incredible amounts of training that you've had, by the way.
Oh, yes.
As I was just reading through your bio.
Hardcore nerd. I'm a nerd's nerd. Now I'm bragging though. It's,
No,
totally
100%. Brag away. When were you at Oberlin?
Oh my gosh. The 90s. So 97 to 2001.
I bet we know some people that went there because I was in school from 96 to 2000. And then I moved to San Francisco afterwards. And I met like a gazillion people that had gone to Oberlin.
Yeah. Yeah. We tend to graduate and move to Brooklyn or San Francisco.
Yeah. So, it's like one or the other.
One or the other. Oh, that's so fun. Yay.
Yeah. I was like, I haven't heard about that in a minute. But anyways. So let's start off with talking about somatics first, because I think that's a thing that maybe is a little bit more of a buzz term these days. Like more people have heard of it, but there's still a lot of people when I bring it up that are like, what does that mean?
Yeah. What is it and how will it help me? I feel like, you know, so absolutely. So two things. So first, what is it? And second, how does it help me? So the word soma comes from the Greek. It means body. And so somatics is the study of the body, or rather in the way I like to work with it is a reclamation of the body as a whole, right? As a whole entity, not just thinking the way we do in Western medicine, in Western society as it is now, of the mind and the body sort of split into these thousands of parts, right? Because there's a gynecologist and a kidney doctor and a liver doctor, right? There's a tummy doctor, there's a brain doctor. We've been split. Yeah. And so somatics helps us to come back into the wholeness of who we are. And so it's the practice and praxis of using these modalities to reclaim ourselves, really, to get anchored in ourselves again. And so the reason it's helpful is because our bodies are incredibly wise, right? Our bodies hold this profound wisdom. And our bodies hold the stress, distress, and trauma of our lifetimes and our ancestral lifetimes. So my work is, I always say it's the place where the science and the woo meet. So you can think of that as epigenetics, or you can think of it as, energetically ancestral. I don't care. Think about it how you will. I think they're both incredibly valid and important entryways. And so somatics allow us a portal, a pathway in to be in conversation with our body, to grow from its wellness and to release that within us, which doesn't serve us, by completing stress activation cycles from our past and our ancestral past.
And I love, it's the word epigenetics is very helpful, I think, for a lot of people to ground.
Sorry, it zoomed the thing again. Do you mind repeating the question?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I was just saying that, I think epigenetics is a great word to sort of get that scientific side of things in for people that need that. But I think it's such an interesting thing that we are scientifically seeing literally through our genes, things are being passed down.
Right.
Literally, I existed in my grandmother's belly when she was pregnant with my mom. Right. And so there's this definitive, like you can almost touch it way that we understand that the impact, the stress that my grandmother went through, at that point can affect me because of that connection, right? And
Right,
and so it's this
right.
very not you, like you were saying, you're the connection of the woo woo and the sort of scientific, but we're really starting to ground it in a different way now that I think people can maybe understand a little bit more.
Sure.
And I love the term, or whatever you want to call it, the issues are in your tissues,
Oof, so
right?
powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's still hard maybe for some people to wrap their brains around the fact that these things get stored in our tissues.
Right.
So can you talk a little bit more about maybe the processing and, fulfilling sort of the process of trauma, that kind of thing, in case it gets stuck along the way?
Yeah. So I'd like, if you don't mind, first to speak to the issues are in the tissues and
Yeah.
help unpack that a little
Yep.
bit for those, like you said, who are like, what on earth are you talking about? Is there sad in my kneecaps? Like,
Kind of. No,
this
I'm
is
just kidding.
garbage. Come on. So when we say that, energies, experiences stay in the body and the issues are in the tissues, what we mean are two things. We mean tension and posture patterns, right? In addition to things like mitochondrial changes, the mitochondria being the powerhouse of the cell. I feel like that's the one thing everyone remembers from 8th grade biology. You know what I mean?
It's said
Powerhouse of the
enough.
cell.
I think
Yeah.
right now it's said enough on social
Yeah,
media that
yeah,
people are
yeah.
like, yeah,
Oh, yeah.
mitochondria. I know what that is. Yeah.
My favorite organelle by far. Really, really into the Golgi apparatus too, but that's a whole other conversation. I'll come back for that one.
For sure.
So cool. So it's about tension patterns and postures. And so it's really about the shape the animal takes in response to the world. So as our nervous system is moving through life and moving through day-to-day interactions, our own tasks and interactions with others, our body shows us the emotional state that's within us that we might be masking as a protective mechanism. And so one of the first places I tell folks to look in order to map their nervous systems and to begin to understand what's going on is their posture. This can get really problematic and ableist. So I just want to say very clearly, there's no like right posture. I'm not saying a straight spine is the best thing. If you have scoliosis or you're in a wheel, like,
right.
Your body is perfect.
Yeah.
Your baseline is what we're starting from, right? And your range of physiologic capacity is the most perfect range for you as a mammal. Done. So, but looking at your posture as you move through the day, where are your shoulders in relationship to your ears, right? Is your spine rounded in a way it wasn't before your mother-in-law called, right? Right? So it's the like, how does the body shift and change in a protective stance, in a defensive stance, or in a meeting the world, arms wide open, I'm open-hearted, I'm here kind of way. And so the issues in the tissues is not just posture, it's that tension. And so it's the body will constrict in response to life. That makes sense, right?
And
so, so where are you holding on? What happens in your life that leads your shoulders to clench, your jaw to clench, your hands to clench, your digestion to clench, your belly to clench, your thought, like where is your body showing you? I am not at ease. I am not in comfort here. Right. And discomfort's not a problem, but it's a guidepost, right? It's a way our body, it's a little flag on the play to say, hey there, are you in presence? Are you breathing? Are you here? Or are you in the past or the future, which is where stress, distress, and trauma takes us. Now, I keep saying stress, distress, and trauma because it's incredibly important. I was at a meditation retreat in the city in New York this weekend, and like 5 different times people use the word triggered to talk about being mildly annoyed. Right. And I think it gets really problematic that we're using this very serious language sort of
all
like
the time.
all the time. And it's like, it's so stress, distress, and trauma. Not everything in life is trauma, right? And we don't need to make the experiences of life, we don't need to raise them to the level of trauma in order for them to be valid for us to want and need support, for them to have impacted us, right? Everything doesn't have to be the worst to have really sucked.
I think
Right?
that's really important. I just kind of want
It's
to like
vital. Yeah, let's
underline
pause.
that right there,
Yeah, right on.
because I do think there has become this thing.
Mhm,
And I think
mhm.
it's very valid that a lot of people didn't understand that they had trauma before,
Sure. Yeah,
right? And
right.
of course, we all have trauma on some
Sure.
level
Life is
from childhood,
inherently
right?
right,
Traumatic,
right.
but it that it doesn't have to be that huge thing in order to have an impact on you and for it to
Right.
be valid,
Right.
and you don't have to
And warrant your
necessarily.
attention.
Right,
Right.
exactly.
Right.
One of the things I tell my clients sometimes, when we're sort of looking, because I'm not a trained therapist, I'm not doing all of that, but I know that I understand that these things are impactful on their hormones, right? And so
Right.
we
Of
dive into
course.
that.
Right.
And one of the things I'll say is that, even as a child, like there may have been something, not a big T trauma, right? Which big T trauma is more like you have been,
Well,
maybe
I'll
you
actually pause you there.
sure. Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't believe in big and little T trauma.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Because I think that sets up a hierarchy that is
Mm,
part and parcel of this really problematic suffering Olympics that makes us
mhm.
believe we need some big T trauma
Right.
or our suffering doesn't matter. It
Right.
doesn't count. It's not valid.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And we can step back and remember trauma is not what happened.
Right.
It's how your nervous system responded to what happened.
Right.
So two soldiers can be in the same foxhole and one comes back shell shocked, right? Which is the old
Mhm.
term for PTSD, CPTSD.
Mhm.
And one comes back totally fine and like goes back to Detroit and works in the factory and has a bunch of kids and like is fine.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Two twins can grow up, and the twin studies are friggin' amazing around
Yeah.
this, can grow up in the literal same household. And one has PTSD from it, and the other's like, I don't know, man. I'm cool.
Yeah.
Like it sucks, but I'm all right.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah.
just wanted to share my opinion. And if
Absolutely.
big
Yeah.
T little T works for you, cool.
Well,
You know?
it's more, I think, when I go into sort of discussing the little T trauma
Mm,
of, maybe your mom told you no when you were
sure.
5 in a way that was, for your safety, or like, I can't afford to buy you this, so I'm saying no.
Sure.
But as a child, you weren't able to process that correctly. So you may
Mm,
have seen that no as I, it is a personal thing. Like I did something wrong, I did something bad, and to understand that that can be part of setting up patterns. And that's,
sure.
because a lot of times I think, at least in my experience with some of my clients, they'll be like, I had a great childhood. Like nothing
Right.
big happened that was
Sure.
wrong, and I was like,
Right.
well, there can be these little things
Sure.
that play out into the
Right.
patterning later in
Right.
life. And that's just as valid, because nobody's life is
Totally
perfect.
right.
Absolutely nobody's life is perfect, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
but I totally get what you're saying in
Right?
terms of the hierarchy and the Olympics and all of that around it.
Totally.
When so much of the time, just again, I'm not a therapist, I'm not all trained in this, but it's just like giving some serious love to
Yeah.
whatever happened to
Right.
you. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and to the parts of us that remain energetically in that time and place. So
Mm-hmm.
one of the absolutely amazing, incredible gifts and of stress, distress, and trauma
Mm-hmm.
is the splitting that happens. So part
Mm.
of us stays in that moment. And that's when we bring in internal family systems work, which is the
Mhm.
work of Dick Schwartz, PhD, which is about looking at the parts within us
Mhm.
and recognizing that yes, we are an integrated whole
Mhm.
as whole adults, and within us there are parts of our psyche that stayed in different moments throughout life. So there are parts
Mhm.
that are joyful and gleeful and like little inner children
Mhm.
that love having a really good time and encourage us to be playful, encourage us to have fun. They want to go to the playground, right?
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
uh, I do CrossFit in large part because my inner children love it. They're like, lift
Mm.
the heavy things, do it. It's
Yeah, I
so
like it. You
fun.
don't even just have an inner child. You're like, I have multiple children,
Oh yeah,
inner children. Yeah.
absolutely. There's so many of
Yeah.
them, which is so beautiful. Yeah, I never understood the concept of the inner child.
Uh-huh.
yeah, there's a whole family within me, which is so beautiful.
Yeah.
And so what happens when we get activated in stress, distress, or trauma post facto is that trauma response takes us back to another time and place, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it zooms us back, and we lose presence, right? We lose our connection with now, which is why, quite frankly, presence is the answer to pretty much
all
everything.
the things. Yeah. Yeah. So I have two kind of questions that came from that.
Yeah.
I want to circle back in a minute to this
Yep.
ancestral part so that people can kind of understand that a little bit
Yeah.
more deeply. But I guess, as you've been talking, I've been thinking a little bit about, every day we sort of hear the horrible things going on in the world.
Sure.
Right. So it's like, if you are of an empathetic nature, which I think a lot of people are on some level, it's easy to maybe get drawn into all of the things that are happening in the world that are out of our control.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
And of course can maybe, just bring us back to things that have happened in our life, or worries about the future, kind of like where you're talking about. So how do you tell people to kind of work with that?
Yeah. So what you're describing is empathy without boundaries, right? Without energetic boundaries. So my passion is in supporting human socialized as women to overcome codependent, perfectionist, and people-pleasing habits, where I look at that sort of constellation of experiences and call it emotional outsourcing. So my definition of codependency, emotional outsourcing, is chronically and habitually sourcing our sense of worth, validation, and safety from everyone and everything outside of ourselves instead of from within us. And so we cannot feel safe or worthy of love, care, the air we breathe, unless someone else is saying, "You're okay. You're okay. You're valuable. I gotcha." Right? We have lost connection with self in order to be able to say that. And so from that understanding of that mindset, right? That codependent way of thinking, that mindset of putting everyone else first, everyone else matters more than us. Everyone, everything is way more important than our opinion, our health, our everything. Most of us come from an emotional outsourcing blueprint. Like that's our family of origin, and their family of origin, and theirs, and theirs, and theirs, and theirs, and theirs. So on that ancestral tip. And so we didn't see boundaries modeled, right? We saw 100%. Our parents, our family members doing things they didn't want to do, and then complaining, being resentful, being pissed off, grumbling around the house, cooking while slamming pots and pans, right? The whole, that whole cute circus of I don't take care of myself, and and F you for asking me to do something, but I didn't say
that. Say no.
But F you for it.
Yeah. The passive aggressiveness often too.
Oh yeah. Passive aggressive, resentful. It's a cute cycle.
It's super
cute, right? It feels great for everyone involved.
Certainly.
So when that is our norm, when that's our mindset, our way of thinking, and our bodies in our posture and tension patterns are primed to give ourselves away, because in childhood, that's what was coded as safe, right? I give myself, my time, my labor, my energy, I give it away. And then those people will protect me from death and doom and the lions that are invariably coming to eat the village, because of course they are.
Right.
Then how could you set a boundary?
Right.
Because you're telling someone no, and you're entirely dependent on others for your sense of wellness. Oh, so telling someone no, I mean, Christine, that sounds pretty dumb, right? Right. So we don't say no, energetically or verbally. Right. So then you're listening to the news, and a world of horrors comes in, and you're porous. So that's a part of emotional outsourcing, is this porous energetic field where whatever wants to can come on in, because you've never said no to it. Right. And so how to work with it is to begin to ask yourself, does this serve me? Right. I stopped listening to the news, like early pandemic, like my whole life, I always listened to like the BBC and Al Jazeera and NPR. Right. And early in the pandemic, living in New York City, which is like, that's
the epicenter. Yeah.
Right. That was, I could see morgue trucks from my roof deck. I mean, it was like super uncute.
Yeah.
I just was like, I have to turn this off.
Yeah.
Not because I want to be uninformed.
Right.
But because here's something, a promise I made to myself, maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, which is that I will no longer allow things outside of me to dysregulate me. Alcohol, caffeine, tobacco, bad news bears, bad, right? Like I stay on top of the news as like a conscious decision. I ground my nervous system. I come into ventral vagal, the safe and social part of the nervous system. I check the headlines, dive deeper when I want to, right?
I think I'm going to stop right there because I think this is really important for people to understand.
Right.
That because it especially with social media, the bombardment can be constant, right? And we're not protected in any form or fashion usually, and we're scrolling often at sort of the most not inopportune times, but nighttime when maybe our defenses are more down, or first thing in the morning, and so I love that you said when you go into looking at news, you're very much like ground yourself essentially, is one way of putting it before you do it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I really strengthen those energetic boundaries around me, not to not empathize, but to be, I don't want to say in control, but what is it? To be intentional, right? To set the volume. And for listeners a little older than me and Christine, I am turning a knob in the air, not clicking a little button. I asked my friend's cousin who was like 15, how do you show you're turning the volume down? And he went like this and clicked his thumb. And I was
that's
like,
hilarious. I would
lost.
not know. I would not know.
Kids these days clicking the buttons. Cute. It was very cute. I get to decide what the volume is.
Yeah.
Right. Coming through into my body.
Yeah.
Early in the pandemic, I was so, like many of us, so chronically overwhelmed by the fear and the worry and, the hugest, but the incidence of mortality and morbidity, just like 10, 15 blocks away from me in a predominantly Latina I'm from Argentina, and I'm white and I'm very privileged. So, my relations, 15, 20 blocks away were dying, and ridiculous numbers. People of color have been dying of COVID outstanding rates, which makes perfect sense in this country.
In our healthcare system. Yeah.
Oh my God. Wait, what? We have a healthcare system?
Yeah, I mean,
I'm so confused. Wait, what? Right. Cool. So I just couldn't help but think of all the abuelas at the food pantry where I volunteered. And I just would sob all day. And I was like, girl, I let myself do it for a few days and then was like, you need a dedicated time. I created a ritual. I created a process for grounding my nervous system. I would ring a bell, think about it, cry my eyes out if I needed to, ring a bell, light some incense, right? Like, and close the circle. And I think that we can use that kind of ritual anytime, any place.
I kind of love that. Another thing I want to just put a point on, because, just to connect this all to hormones, when it comes down to it, our hormones need safety and security to work properly, right? Because of the brain ovarian connection, it is as soon as something feels unsafe, the brain processes it that way. It's going to essentially kind of down regulate sex hormone production, right?
Yeah, and so, adrenal hormones,
right? And it's going to upregulate your stress hormones and down regulate your
cortisol.
Sex hormones. And so this is what I tell my clients all the time, and people that are listening. It's like safety and security is very important for the process to, work as it evolved to work. And so when we are under this constant stress, it's not going to be able to work right. You could take all the supplements in the world, you can eat 100%. All the right foods, et cetera, et cetera. And so I really love what you just said about the ritualistic aspect, because if you do think about how humans evolved in most cultures over time, there were rituals,
of course,
for all
I'd say
things.
In all. Yeah. I mean, the Celts, right? Like, it doesn't matter where you go on the planet.
It was part rules. It was part of who we all were, I think. I mean, just like I go to so many of the things that humans have been doing forever when we're talking about health stuff. Like you
Right.
need sleep, you know, you need sunlight. Like these are the foundationals that you can't get away from. But yeah, I think that is there's so many people that are kind of hungry for ritual at this point,
Yeah.
and this is a different way of even I mean, I get that some people understand using ritual for you know, particularly, I mean, even funerals, things like that are technically
Right.
rituals. But
I
to
mean,
be
and
this
surgery has a
consciousness.
ritual.
Right. Right.
Surgery has a ritual, right?
Right.
So if I was doing a vasectomy or putting an IUD in,
Yeah.
I have a checklist,
Right. Right.
right? Which is in its way its own ritual,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Like to put an IUD in, I check all of my tools. I make
Mhm.
sure they're all sterile. I make sure
Mhm.
I have size 6 sterile gloves,
Mhm.
right? And I walk through the procedure in my head,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
the ritual is everywhere
Yeah.
and we just get to name it as such.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Like self-care is everywhere. You don't need to buy the fancy eye
Right.
mask. I mean, girl, I love the fancy eye mask. Let's
Yeah.
not,
I mean, I
right?
need an eye
Come on
mask to
now.
sleep.
Oh no, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
you're
for
talking
sure, for
about
sure.
like
Like,
just
right,
regular.
like
Yeah,
some,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes,
No,
but
I
like,
need a cover to sleep, but yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah. But we don't need to.
Right.
No, and I think that's part of the problem, right? Because we have gotten so extracted from the commons, and we have lost contact with our matriarchs and
Mhm.
um, with collectivist ritual.
Mhm.
And so folks think that it's something beyond them.
Right,
So
absolutely. Feels like this big thing you have to do.
right, right, right.
Mhm.
That someone else has to tell you how to do. So
Mm,
one of the
mhm,
things, so the way folks can work with me is in a 6-month program called Anchored,
mhm,
which is all about all of this. We use thought work, somatics, breath work, all the science,
mhm,
all the
mhm,
sacred coming together
mm,
and anchored. And one of the things we do, I think it's week 7, is work with ritual. And so
mhm,
really looking at where is ritual already in your life and what does it look like for you to build your own ritual, to
mhm,
begin your day, to end your day, to begin your meal, end your meal. So you talked about the adrenals, the mind body axis, the vagus nerve, and nutrition, which is the
mhm,
building block of hormones,
mhm,
right? You
mhm,
cannot digest your food or your supplements if your nervous system is not in what's called ventral vagal, which is the safe part of the nervous system.
mhm,
And that makes sense. Christine, let me ask you a question.
mhm.
If you were being chased by a lion, would you want your body to stop running and digest a fistful of supplements or a cheeseburger?
Right, exactly. It's a
Right? Oh, wait, was that a no
right.
or
I was like, if it could do both at the same time, but it can't. Yeah.
can't?
Yep.
It's
Yep.
gonna be one or
Exactly.
the other, kitten.
Exactly.
So,
Yep. Yep.
uh-huh.
And that connects back to, you know, what I tell my clients all the time too, you know, whether or not you want to get pregnant is not
Right.
the question to be asked, right? Our body is the whole cycle, menstrual cycle is set to do that, you know? I mean, certainly it's a very, very valid question if you want to get pregnant or not. We're putting that aside, but our body wants to feel that safety all the time to be able to
Oh,
do that, right? I know that was not making a lot of sense, but
I didn't know where you're going.
yeah,
Right,
yeah,
but
yeah. You're like, what's happening here?
balanced estrogen is vital for bone development.
Right.
So,
So
like,
many other
what's the
things.
number one? Right, what's
Yeah.
the number one killer of little old ladies?
Right.
Pneumonia. How does she get pneumonia? She falls and breaks a hip
Mm-hmm.
and then cannot
Mm-hmm.
move after
Yep.
hip surgery
Yep.
and gets pneumonia and dies.
Right.
And that's a crappy way to die.
Right.
You know what I
100%.
mean?
Yeah. A very preventable way too, you know? Yeah.
Totally. And
Yeah.
so how do we do everything in our power to prevent that?
Right.
We embody safety.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
really mean it,
Mm-hmm.
right? We learn to map our nervous system, learn to ground our nervous system,
Mm-hmm.
calm our nervous system, heal our nervous system using somatics and thought work.
Mm-hmm.
And through that process, balance our estrogen progesterone, which
Right.
then, right? So estrogen becomes testosterone in the
Yep.
periphery.
Yep.
And so we need testosterone for bones, for
Yep.
muscles, right? We need that for balance.
Yep.
We need balanced estrogen so we don't get osteopenia and osteoporosis,
Yes.
right? So for
And
bone
heart health and
density,
brain health.
come
Yeah.
on now.
Yep. Yep.
So balancing your nervous system, really regulating your nervous system and understanding yourself and how to relate to yourself through your soma, not just as a brain, but really as as a body, not just someone with. There's a Susan McConnell quote. God, I love that woman. She has somatic internal family systems work. She says and I'm going to paraphrase here, but sort of the goal of somatics, or the process of a gift of somatics, is it helps us to know and believe that it's not that we have a body, it's that we are our bodies. And that seems so basic until you have done it.
Right.
Right. And once you are actually living in your body, everything's different.
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah. You know, I mean, it's similar to me in a way that, you know, we understand that we need food to survive, but a lot of us don't think about food, what is in the food, the nutrients that are in the food actually make up our organs and our tissues and everything, you know? And it's the same thing of sort of embodiment of that, you know, embodiment of breaking down the food, the digestion, all of these things. And I mean, like you said, this is actually why I focus so much on the nervous system and your cortisol, your stress hormone in my practice, first and foremost, because everybody wants to jump to estrogen and progesterone, which are hugely important, but you can't regulate those without regulating your adrenals, essentially.
Right. If your cortisol awakening curve is flat.
Right. Yep.
What? Come on.
Yeah. Yeah. And for those that don't know what that is, that's basically
find out.
First thing. Yeah. Right. First thing in the morning. How is your cortisol? Is it going up in the sort of the way that we need it to go up? Right. And then gently start to come down throughout the day. And unfortunately, one of the tests that I run, I don't know if you know the Dutch test.
Yeah. Of course.
Yeah. And that's, you know, I've talked about the Dutch a lot on the podcast, and that's one way of measuring your car and also just measuring your cortisol throughout the day, which if you don't have that oomph of cortisol rising in the morning, you're gonna be struggling, right? And that's gonna throw off your entire circadian rhythm too, you know, which is a huge part of the infradian rhythm.
Right. So what are the stories you're telling about yourself throughout the day that are hijacking your nervous system? What is your mindset? Because when it's codependent, when it is around emotional outsourcing, you are your own harshest critic. That inner gremlin is like snacking on pizza all night long. You know what I mean? It is like full claws out against you. That story says, I don't want to, but I'm going to because I'm supposed to, because taking care of me is selfish. Right? You see where these stories lead us, right? We choke down our healthy anger. Right? We choke down our healthy sadness. We choke down our healthy joy, right? We numb out all of our emotions, or have explosive emotions, right? It tends to be a dysregulated state, emotional outsourcing, in which our emotions, our mood, and our nervous systems are living in extremes. And from those extremes, our hormones and our adrenal chemicals, those hormones are jacked. Right. Our reproductive and adrenal hormones. I mean, don't even come on, like the pancreas and diabetes. Right. And then what's Alzheimer's, diabetes type 3? I mean, like,
thank you.
Right. Like, let's go down the line. Of like whatever is ailing us. And you circle it back to mindset, nervous system, mindset, nervous system. And the answer to both is 100%. Somatic presence, embodied presence and safety.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've talked a little bit about codependency, obviously in the package of what's going on in the world, but let's talk more about codependency so that people that I feel like a lot of people have probably heard about codependency, but they don't know how that may or may not be showing up in their life.
Yeah. So like I've been saying, it's really thinking that your opinion doesn't matter in this core way, or so that's the core issue, right? It's all about self-worth and believing that you're somehow not as worthy of love as others. Right? Your opinion isn't as valuable, your wants, your needs. And so that can manifest, I find, in one of two extremes, in the martyr, the savior, the saint, or in the fixer, right? In the fixer, the know-it-all, the always opinion, right? Which, like, I have been both in my lifetime. I have definitely, right? Where I'm like,
I have too.
You
I get
know,
it.
right?
Yeah.
I have learned to ask consent before giving my opinion, but I mean, in my 20s, in particular, in my 20s and early 30s, someone would be like, "Oh, I have a bellyache," and I'd be like,
let me tell
"Well,
you what's
your
going
gut
on.
microbiome," and I would just jump in as though
Yeah.
they actually wanted my opinion. It was not very feminist, but it was, doing the
It's
best I
being
could
in
with the
your
tools I
20s.
had. It's
Like,
and being someone with codependent thinking in my 20s,
right.
so
And I think
really,
this is a really important thing for you to be talking about, because, and that's kind of why I wanted to go more deeply into it, is because I think a lot of times people think codependency like, oh, in my romantic relationship, I lean on this person too much.
right.
That's kind of maybe the viewpoint of codependency. So I'm glad that you're expanding on what it can look like for people.
Yeah. So, yeah. Okay. So then let's do that. So, the old school story of what codependency is, it's a series of defects in your character. You're kind of permafucked. If
Mm,
you are a codependent, it's your identity, it's who
right.
you are, and you have to be constantly vigilant because it's who you are.
Mhm, mhm.
And it is who you are because you're in relationship to an alcoholic or someone who uses substances. Now, again, for those of you listening who are like, damn, I thought she would have used people first language.
Mhm,
I'm talking about the old definition. I don't
mhm,
say alcoholics in my life,
mhm,
except when I'm talking about this. So that's the old definition, right? And so I didn't get help, care, support for my own codependent mindset because that's not me. I wasn't
mm,
like dating an alcoholic. I don't get
mhm,
it. I must not be codependent.
mhm,
That's
mhm.
just not me. And so that kept me from really stepping out of it and stepping into my full power in my 20s because I was like, nah. Yeah, sure. I do all of those things. I have all of those thoughts, but like, can't that no.
Mhm,
That's no. So I think that's why it's really this redefinition and
mhm.
reframing is so incredibly potent, powerful, needed,
Yeah.
as well as bringing in a really feminist lens.
Mhm,
So the way I think about it is again this chronic and habitual mindset and postural relationship to the world,
mhm, mhm.
right? And for me, it has nothing to do, of course, if you start talking to folks who are emotional outsourcers who have a codependent mindset, they may be in relationship to or may have grown up with folks who use substances in a way
Right,
that's problematic,
right.
um, but also not.
Mhm,
Because we're also all living in relationship to the patriarchy. Right? We're living in relationship to white settler colonialism and late
mhm,
stage capitalism,
mhm.
systems that demand that humans writ large, but particularly those socialized as women and assigned female at birth, that we put ourselves last, that we take care of everyone and everything ahead of us, or we're wrong, we're bad, we're selfish, and that's a terrible thing.
Mhm.
So we are inculcated, we are taught and trained to think this way, most of us from birth.
Mhm,
And so then
mhm.
add into that a family system where these ways of behaving, of believing, of acting, of thinking, of feeling are the norm. And that's what sets us up for it.
Mhm,
Right. And
mhm,
so I really talk about codependent thinking at work with your best friends. Sure, in your romantic relationship with strangers on the street. Oh my God, I
mhm.
used to do this thing because I wanted validation so badly. I would, when I was walking around New York, I would like not almost, I would like hope that someone's backpack would be open or someone would drop something or someone would need
Mm,
directions because then I
mhm,
could matter. I could
mm.
step in and I could give guidance and I could be, excuse me, your backpack's open. You know what I mean? Of
Right, yeah,
like,
yeah,
I wanted to step in and feel needed
yeah,
because it was through feeling needed that I felt valuable,
yeah,
right?
yep,
And I think, in business that becomes when I am creating and producing like content, when I'm
yep,
doing, when I'm
yep.
right?
Absolutely. And
That is what
even
yeah,
practitioners I was thinking about too, right?
yeah.
How, and I've had to battle this myself, like taking on too much of your
Oh
client
my
stuff,
God.
because you're taking it
Right.
on as like I have to heal you
Right. Well,
or et
I
cetera. Yeah.
fail. as though we could heal anyone.
Right.
Anytime someone calls themselves a healer, I'm
exactly. No, I'm the same way. I'm like, don't
check yourself, kitten. Check yourself, kitten, because no, because no.
It's a little red flag.
Yeah, it really is for me, eh? Yeah. So yeah, and I also remember, I had a private practice doing functional medicine in Manhattan for many years, and somewhat in that practice, but really when I was primary care, if a patient wasn't quote unquote compliant early on, right? Like early on in my FQHC days, someone wasn't quote unquote compliant, I would take it personally. I would get upset. I would demonize them. And that's the ethos of medicine, right? Of like, how dare they?
Yeah.
And that's because our egos were getting involved, and our
100%.
egos get involved, and we take it personally from this codependent relationship that we put on everyone and everything in our lives, right? That keeps us out of presence, out of being here, being now, being real with what is, including our own feelings, right? So back to the doom scrolling, that sort of, everyone doom scrolls, not everyone who doom scrolls is an emotional outsourcer, but it is buffering against our feelings is a really common thing that we do from emotional outsourcing, because we don't know how to sit with our feelings. We don't know how to be present with ourselves because we've never done it. We weren't shown how to. It was never safe for us. So we don't do it.
Yeah.
We do everything possible to avoid it, including trying to fix other people's lives, having every opinion, having no opinion, making rash decisions, making no decisions. Right?
Yes.
Living in those extremes in the nervous system.
Oh, so true. I can see so much of my life that you're describing here,
Oh my gosh,
that I've
right?
taken years to work through. And I think this is so important for people to really get, so they don't have to wait years and years and years and years to start to get out of that cycle.
Right.
So let me ask you how you started to get out of the cycle within your personal experience.
Yeah. The first thing was really coming to terms with it and really recognizing that, look, this actually was how I was moving through the world. And though the term codependent never resonated, I can't imagine it ever will, but all between us, signs and symptoms, right? But codependency is not a disease. So in my opinion, it's a widely held opinion that it is, but all the experiences, the things that are part and parcel of that way of living and thinking and being are and were my lived experience, right? And so from there, because, I'm trained in epidemiology, I'm a nerd's nerd. I love patterns. So starting to really map and track when and where I was leaving myself. 0 to 10, how easily am I leaving myself? Where do I go when I leave myself? Usually people pleasing, right? Usually appeasing the fawn reaction in the nervous system, usually trying to make someone else happy or like me or care about me, trying to manage, AKA manipulate, someone else's feelings, because someone else having feelings was not safe in my childhood. And so no, don't have feelings, right? Let me feed you. Let me take care of you. Let me do anything I can to keep you happy with me, and not having the complexity of human feelings, because I don't know what's going to happen here.
Right.
So I'm not going to have them either. Right? Which keeps us in that frozen state within our nervous system, from which we don't have access to the full range of human emotions, and keep doing everything possible to keep others from having theirs. Right? And we don't realize that, oh my God, I'm trying to keep my people from having emotions.
Right.
When I overcook, overgift, overfunction, over, but that's the core of what we're doing. I'm scared that you might have a feeling, and I don't know how to handle it. And I'm sure you don't know how to handle it, because right?
Yeah.
So really coming to understand that, coming to see it, really learning how to map it, and then doing the two things we can do with our nervous system, which are to calm it and to heal it. They are equally important skills. They are equally important things to do. And we do them in different moments. These different moments call for it.
Right.
And again, one is not superlative to more better than the other. calming our nervous system is the slow inhale, long, slow out, right? Is your woosah moment is right. A moment of meditation or breathing or calming to come back to ventral vagal by calming the nervous system. Now that does not heal the nervous system. Right. It doesn't reset the nervous system. You know, my training is in somatic experiencing and sensory motor psychotherapy as a coach. You're not doing long-term healing, but you are showing your nervous system and your body that you are capable of calming it. And I think that's a beautiful thing. 100%. And more important, it's keeping you from freaking out at Grand Central or LAX or where or your kid's school or, you know, it's keeping you from doing something you might need to apologize for later. So do it. And the way we heal the nervous system is by allowing completion of the stress activation cycle. Right. And do you want me to dive into that? I know we're getting short on time. Do you want me to point people? I have an episode about it.
Yeah, for sure. We've talked about it a little bit on the podcast, but I love hearing the different sort of processes and options for people. So yeah, dive into that.
Yeah, right on. So the 2 seconds of what is the stress activation cycle is, you are a baby and you're in your little crib and the cat jumps in with you, scares the crap out of you. 'Cause like, cat. You cry. Your grown-up comes, your nervous system that just went into sympathetic activation, adrenaline, eventually cortisol, calms down, right? Goes back to ventral vagal. Grown-up is here. Safety is here. I'm okay. When scary happens, I'm safe, right? I was unsafe, but now I'm safe. That's what your nervous system learns about you and the world. That's what leads to and creates safe attachment, secure attachment is that cycle, right? Fright, attunement, fright, attunement. When we are not attuned to, the nervous system continues to go into more and more adrenaline, right? Which is sympathetic activation, fight or flight. So from fright, we go to flight. Oh God, I gotta get out of here. Get me away from this cat. But you're like 8 months old. You barely roll over. There's no flight for you. So more adrenaline leads you into rage. That is the next step. Rage prepares you for fight, right? So you try to push the cat. You would punch if you knew how and weren't 8 months old. And your body's being flooded with even more adrenaline. Your heart is beating fast. Your little palms are getting sweaty. You're starting to panic because the cat's sitting on you and you don't understand cat and no one's coming. The body is starting to realize it's been a minute. It's been 2. No one is coming. So then from that rage and that fight, and your body has put out all the adrenaline it can, despair sets in. No one's coming. Oh, I am in this alone. And that is horrifying for a mammal, particularly a small one. And so the body says, disassociate. From despair, do not be here, right? And it takes the psyche and in a way splits from the body. In that state, from my nerds out there, in that original, the fright, fight, flight, Broca's area is turned off. We're flooded with endogenous cannabinoids. And then once we go into flight, into freeze rather, when your body's like, you know what, this is really scary, this is terrible, don't actually be present for this because this cat might be a lion and we just don't know it and you're about to get snacked and I'm really sorry. I want you to not be present. You go into freeze. And that's all the adrenaline starts to, acetylcholine is the predominant hormone there, or neurotransmitter rather, and you shut down. You go into dorsal, which is the frozen part of the nervous system where endogenous opioids are the jam, because your body is downregulating your pain response. When it downregulates pain, it downregulates emotions and mood. And so you not only get numb to pain, you get numb to presence, to yourself. You can't feel your emotions when you're in freeze by absolutely divine design, right? Because you're about to be a snack. And frankly, that would be stupid.
Right.
And creation is much smarter than that. And so you're off. You're emotionally, shut down. And we've all experienced like touches of this where you're talking to someone and there's an underlying stressor or the conversation's stressful. And then wait, Christine, what was that? Wait, what? Oh, sorry. I just went into dorsal freeze. Just a little, just a spritz, right? Nothing to worry about, but just a touch. So from that dorsal freeze, a lot of folks get stuck, right? The nervous system gets sort of stuck there. But there's still adrenaline in us. And until we can, completing the stress activation cycle is allowing that adrenaline or the dorsal freeze to come all the way out of our body. And so the way to do that, the way we do that in somatic experiencing, the work of Dr. Peter Levine, is to go back in time to that moment when the cat jumped on you and to complete the movement, the verbalization, whatever it was you wanted to do in that moment, allow your body to complete that activity as a way to let your body know it's safe to not release more adrenaline, but release the adrenaline from your body that it's been holding sort of captive within you in case that threat keeps going. So too with dorsal, it's safe to come out of dorsal and come back into presence and complete that stress activation cycle. So that's the work that heals the nervous system and expands our window of capacity to be with ourselves and have more flexible nervous systems instead of rigid nervous systems.
Yeah, that was beautifully put. And I've never even realized that you go into flight first. And then fight, that was really great that you kind of broke that down.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
Yeah. So really quickly, I guess probably some people wonder, well, how do you figure out those moments in your life where something stressful happened and I did not complete the process, in somatic.
You work with someone who does somatic experiencing. So this is guided work. This is, we can do a lot of this on our own, but we need to learn the basics by having someone hold our little paw. Right. And support us and guide us. Because it can be, your nervous system is the soup you swim in. Right. You're at home with your own nervous system all day. And so it's really helpful to have someone to guide you, to show you, to ask you important guiding questions. Remember, as humans, we are meaning-making machines. And so your brain is likely to ascribe meaning to things that might not mean what you think they mean.
Right.
And so that's why having a therapist or a coach like myself, who's really well-trained in these modalities, is absolutely vital. And it's the cornerstone of the work we do in Anchored is, yes, working with our mindsets, because mindset is a huge part of this, but coming back to the soma, back to the body, back to the body. I think it's the only way to overcome codependent thinking. Right. To step out of people pleasing is holistically, if we want it to be sustainable, which is my goal, is for my clients not to need me,
Right. Yeah. And I think that those are the two areas that are maybe from a hormonal standpoint are overlooked the most, right? Is that healing aspect, right? Of going back and healing and processing all the way through, and then mindset. I think a lot of times people will jump just to mindset.
Right.
Because it's a thing right now, but you can't jump over
in a way.
Right. But it doesn't, in my opinion, in my experience, does not work.
If I agreed before you finish that thought, sister, because
you're like, I've seen that firsthand a lot.
Right. Huge. It's vital. And if the soma's not on board, if the body's not on board, we can't change.
Affirmations aren't going to get you there.
Thanks for just summing that up. They're not. And affirmations, there's study after study in the positive psychology realm that shows affirmations are super cute. They're dope. They're important. But no, they're not. They are neither the end all nor the be all. So
So tell people, you've mentioned the program that you do. Tell people a little bit more about that and how to contact you.
So Anchored is a 6-month container for humans socialized as women who are really sick of living in the old tired ways, who are detached from their bodies, living from the neck up, who want their relationships with themselves and the world to be so much more better. Anchored is the program for you. It's a beautiful, intimate container. It's a small group experience where you get lots of time with me and lots of time with the other folks in the program, because healing is not an individual sport, right? It is a community led practice. And so we need each other. We need each other deeply for our own healing. You can learn more about that at victoriaalbina.com/anchored. You can, it's a really, it's a darn good time.
And I, especially I'd say for anybody that's maybe has been interested in somatic, therapy and that kind of thing, and that struggled to find maybe a good somatic therapist, this is a perfect opportunity to kind of dive in with someone that is obviously very knowledgeable about all of these things.
Thank you. And I will just add the caveat that if your body's saying you need somatic therapy, like if you are dysregulated, if you are triggered where you can't get out of bed, then coaching is not the first stop for you, my beloved, right? I'm a nurse practitioner above all, right? So safety first.
Yes.
If you cannot get out of bed, if you are having suicidal ideation in a serious way, therapy first, coaching second. Right?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Are there any social media?
Oh my God, there are so many.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can follow me on the gram. I give good gram at Victoria Albina Wellness. And I have a special treat for your people.
Oh, exciting.
So it is a suite of meditations and nervous system orienting exercises, and you can have it for free just because you're wonderful and you deserve it. So if you go to victoriaalbina.com/hormonally speaking. Yay!
I like it.
You can download. Right. And my show is called Feminist Wellness. It's for humans of all genders who want to live a full and exciting, passionate life. And you can find that literally all of the places. So
all of the places.
Go to all of the places.
Perfect. Oh man, what an amazing conversation. Thank you for sharing all of your expertise and really breaking things down for everyone listening. So appreciate the work that you do in the world.
This was such a blast. It was so much fun. And thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Okay, you guys, I will see you next time.